Shirley Yu began her journey as a computer scientist. She's also an award-winning conceptual still life and environmental portraiture photographer, with clients including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Time. She's also the founder of Choosii, a community app for collectors to curate, share, and acquire their collections, and cultivate connections. Join us as we speak about Shirley's journey from computer science to entrepreneurism, her creative process, and cultivating community through our collections. I'm Michelle Ong, and this is Steam Powered. Right, good evening, Shirley. Thank you so much for joining me today on Steam Powered. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you about your journey from computer science and photography all the way through to, entrepreneurism.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. It's been a really busy week. But it's all been gearing up to now my whole life. So happy to be here and speak with you,
Absolutely.
Michelle.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's just very exciting for you, very excited for you. And so, you started off your journey in computer science, and, that's very cool because fancy that, so am I. But, what drew you to that field to begin with?
Ever since I was young, I've had a lot of people in my family, in my circle that were in the STEM field. Almost everyone from my parents, my grandparents. So I've always grown up with technology around me. I've always been able to see. I've always been able to see great ideas made real, and people making a really big impact through tech. My uncle is an astrophysicist in Beijing. My grandfather was a nuclear physicist. My parents were programmers themselves. So by the time I was old enough to pick my own path, I it was one of those things that was almost like a default choice for me. It was almost like I have known so much about this field. I had been in high school learning about programming in the sense of just having conversations with my dad in on the breakfast table, learning about arrays and data with bacon and plates. So it seemed as normal to me as math or reading. Just a lot of familiarity around it. And so when it came time to pick a major, I went to Rutgers in New Jersey. Um, I went with what I knew, and I went with computer science because it was almost like taking building blocks. And I had been a creative. I had worked with arts and worked with photography, and my hobbies were really about making things. So it felt like the most practical career choice that also enabled me to build and tinker and make things of my own as well. So this was like pieces of a toolbox that I already knew, and what I did with that toolbox was up to me after that point.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. Like computer science, it's just this foundation that you can just build off into so many different areas, especially if you are creative. And there's so many aspects of computer science that can give you kind of that tangible gratification of building something and being able to see what you've created.
Absolutely. I had a really great experience with my professors in college too. One of them was technical and creative, just like me, and he told me about this one artist that was an alum of Rutgers themselves too, who made like 3D printed sculptures with algorithms making the sculptures themselves. And when we think about how algorithms, math, these things appear in life, like the Fibonacci spiral and the golden ratios and everything like that. There's this like intentionality to and logic to the universe that So it was this first time, like my college experience, I saw this intersection of creativity and technology. Um, and so it was really like my faculty, the people around me, inspired me thinking, this is a really great toolbox that not a lot of artists actually get to use or are that familiar with. So having so much familiarity and experience with it was this gift, and I didn't know what I would do with it at that point, but I knew I wanted to do something of my own.
Yeah, absolutely. So with photography, because you've made that your career so far, was that something that you pursued before you entered computer science and then it kind of just blended together?
Yeah, I would say that in high school, I explored many different hobbies, very many clubs. Something about photography that drew me in was the idea of coming together on a project, on a vision. Um, I really loved the physics of it all. In terms of like, finding something in our world, putting these building blocks together. And capturing it in front of you. It was like this creative problem solving that didn't have, painting and drawing. That's just everything from your imagination, everything from your mind. And photography was, whatever your vision was, you actually had to make it come to life too. There was the physics of it. And that was
Yeah.
a creative problem solving that I really enjoyed. Not only was I, seeing maybe even a surreal scene or a still life or a portrait, I had to look in all 40, areas of the frame just to make sure everything was how I imagined it. So there's this aspect of imagination and there's this aspect of making it real as well. And I always thought with my career path, I was open to the next step, no matter what that next step was. I was going to grab the bull by the horns and take the opportunities as they interested me, as they came. So I started off in high school exploring photography, reading books, and going to different classes in the city. I took a class at FIT, and then when I studied computer science, I put that in the forefront, but I still had this creative bug inside of me. So, to learn more about the professional industry, I got my own certification in all of the camera um, hardware and software. I became a digital technician on photography and film sets. And that was my entry point into, learning about the industry itself, which I fell in love with at that time. I fell in love with it. And I realized that, even when I entered school, I wasn't sure that photography was a real career option for me. Again, I was more familiar with people having very technical career paths, like straight up technical career paths,
Yeah.
not necessarily like a fluid one like I have now. But so, getting on set and realizing there were so many paths to take, I decided to learn from observation. Many people who enter the studio photography film side, there are two paths, right? You go to art school or you start doing your own projects. You maybe start assisting or interning on sets. And everybody on a set really had a same dream, whether you were a production assistant or a photography assistant, lighting assistant, gaffer, digital technician. We were all there working together on one team to make a creative project happen, to make beautiful conceptual images or inspirational ones, what have you, pieces of art. So when I started on set as a digital technician, I realized that that was a viable career choice for me, and so this was this like balancing act for a couple of years. I would, um, I even nerded out with some of my professors about arts and about arts, about photography and magazines. I had read tons of magazines about tech and business, fashion and culture, because my mom loved magazines as well.
Yep.
So I really swirled myself with everything that interested me, and it was this period where I was going to school, and on the summers, winters, the nights and weekends, was uh, I was renting a studio in Queens with like, 3, 4 other artists. One of whom, my friend Leo, who's now an engineer at Meta, we met in the photography club, and we were both in a comp sci degree, and we actually ended up sharing a studio too. In college, I was going to class during the morning, during the early afternoon, and then at night I would work at the school newspaper, in the photography department. And then
Yeah.
on the weekends, I would go in and I would start, you know, with my sketches, and I would make some art, and I would go back, and it was this balance for a while. And it was all fun, because there were so many things that interested me that I photographed. And there was a point, maybe 3 years into college, halfway through, I knew I was going to finish my degree, but I also
Yep.
knew that it was going to be a viable career path for me if I wanted to go the creative studio route too.
Mm.
By the time I was 21, so my senior year, I had been nominated for an industry award. I had
That's
published a
awesome.
couple of projects. I had had a couple of exhibitions, a couple pieces in the press, and just from my projects on the weekends. And
Yeah.
uh, before I graduated, I got a call. I was commissioned to shoot the cover of Time magazine in 2016
Wow.
when I graduated.
That's
It was a
awesome.
story about self-driving cars. Because some of the things that I really loved to photograph, and I made sure that everyone in the industry knew it. I loved to photograph stories about technology. I loved to photograph
Yeah.
stories about business too. So portraits of entrepreneurs, of chief executives, um, startup founders, and conceptual artwork, still lives and animations, about technology. That was that was awesome. So when you photograph the cover of Time, you're kind of like, I could do this as a career if I wanted to. This
This
is really
seems like a
fun.
viable option now.
It was fun. I think it's a
Yeah.
viable option now. But I'm gonna finish my degree too because it's super close. And I always thought that the more you learn, the more that's in your toolbox for you to work with as time goes on. I always think that you can never really learn enough.
Mm.
Both sides too, learn more about the things you are curious about. If you are a primary technician, learn more about creativity. If you are a creative, learn more about technology. I One of my photographers that I look up to the most, his name is Steve Giralt. I had applied to work at his studio like 3 times. Twice in college, once afterwards. He's what we call a visual engineer. Um, his main style of artwork is like things crashing into each other, and his the equipment that he works with are like giant motion capture robots
Yeah.
and action packed still lives. And I remember the first time I applied to work at his studio, I was like, you make art with robots. Want to I want to learn how to operate robots. I want to learn how to I just loved that he had this new take. I'm always curious about how technology pushes art forward. So,
Mm.
you know, using things like robots, using things like AI, using and using these things to create, you know, to create. So I remember even the photographers that I admired had this special bent about them that was pushing the craft forward.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be in that world. And I learned I could. And so when you learn you could, and you're having really a lot of fun. I was like, I graduated and continued with the studio that I shared. I built up a little practice. I had magazine clients. I had, you know, eventually corporate clients, Toyota, Barclays, some magazine clients, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and eventually also, every year I did a personal project too. Sometimes it would be published or exhibited. Sometimes it would just be something that I added to my own body of work,
Yeah.
where I would just, no one was paying me, no one was publishing me, and just a way for me to catch really good ideas and make them real. Um, that was the most the fun part was learning just like what you're capable of doing. If you're, doing that on a small scale, you really do believe that, you're exercising the muscles to be able to solve problems and in really creative ways. Every time I have a friend who maybe founded a startup, I always say that like I'm like that kind of user who will give them three ideas to, things that they haven't thought of to, oh my gosh, you should add add this to your app, or you could try going in this direction. I'm a very annoying user of startup app, but it's helpful. I hope, because when I have an idea, I usually get like at least three at once, and my brain is passively creative, and I, for my own app, I would want to know, and I do from my Choosii Discord. I get all sorts of really great ideas all the time, and I'm always open minded to it. I'm never married from one solution from point A to point B. So I'm definitely that kind of person that's always just passively creative because I've nurtured that part of my brain. It's made me better for everything that I learned about programming, about, engineering, about logical thinking. I also feel like the things that I learned beyond a textbook from being a creative person, from being a creative entrepreneur myself, and just having unusual experiences in life and having access to interesting spaces, learning from life, all of those things I've absorbed outside of a textbook, outside of, corporate work, um, has made me, I think, you know, better in the sense that even even if, we're not reinventing the wheel, right? What I believe as an artist is that we all have a point of view, a new taste, a new style. So I don't believe necessarily that just because something exists, you can't add to it. You can always add your perspective. You can always add your taste to your style to anything that's out there. Anything that's out there, I mean, can be innovated with a little bit of creativity.
Absolutely. And that's so true because look how many times they've remade or added a twist to the way that they interpret Shakespeare. I mean, it's just one
Exactly.
play, but people just spin it in all these different ways because of the way that they perceive the journey themselves.
Right.
And yeah,
I
everything that
just
we
got,
do. Yeah.
oh, yeah, everything that we do, I feel like is always from our own experience too. It can always be iterated on. Just today,
Yeah.
I got a tweet. I read a tweet that went like, "Oh, you know what? Like, I'm making Choosii. It's social item discovery. It is a TikTok for things. uh, it is a way for it is almost a social platform centered around objects, right?
Yeah.
I collect exotic plants, and I'm constantly looking for plants. I'm also looking for planty friends, so I made a social experience where, for me, I'm an enthusiast. I'm a collector of things. We can all nerd out together about the things that we're into. It's
Yeah.
also a really good way to discover things, to match weird, odd, obscure things with the people who are obsessed with them. Very odd, as odd as creepy dolls, or you know you know DVDs that are obscure, or first edition books. And I was reading this tweet today. It was like, well, isn't that just eBay? Isn't that just Etsy? And for me, uh, you know, f- just because there is a way for people to find weird things, it's almost like, Facebook wasn't even the first social platform. It was,
Mm.
there was MySpace before that, there was Friendster before that.
Yep.
um, the idea for me is, I have put things on eBay myself. Um, you can find plants even on eBay yourself. But that's not a social experience. That's not the
No.
fun. It's almost like going to a store versus
Mm.
or ordering something online versus going to a festival, going to a convention center. The experience, what we're adding to it, in my opinion, is the spirit, right? It's not just
Yep.
about transactions. It's about the relationships that we build, the passion and spirit that we have, uh, and just also based on the idea of item selling as well. It's,
Mm.
when I put an item, especially a very niche item, out into the world, into a vacuum, 2 hours later, I'm telling you, it'll be on the ninth page of eBay. It'll be on
Yep.
like page 42 of Etsy in like a day, because the
Mhm.
people who are motivated to buy these things, um, you know, we're not going on eBay or Etsy until it's time for us to buy the next thing.
It's a
Um,
fully transactional experience.
it's a fully transactional experience. And a community space, I go to my community spaces every single day. I might
Mm.
not be looking for anything that day. I might not be, it might not be my motivation on any given day to get something, but I might stumble across something that one of my fellow friends marked for sale. I might
Yeah.
go there. It's almost like when you go to a convention center, you don't even think you're going to buy something, and you come home with a bag full of stuff.
Yep.
That's the joy of discovering something versus having to go out with just the transactional, motivation. Uh,
Mm.
and it's funny because, when you so much of what I believe in is taking artistry into tech. And or there's
Yeah.
something about artistry that is hard when you are just looking at the numbers, when you're just looking at, the actions. If you're just
Mhm.
going through, what actions are you measuring? If you're saying how many sales, you're just going to look at that one aspect of it. But
Yeah.
for example, an experience that includes sales as like an interaction, because everything I've gotten from my plant collection is from other collectors. Um,
Yeah.
and that's just one of the ways that we interact with each other. But so much of adding something to an experience or to a tech platform. When I talk about artistry, it's talking about conceptually. It's talking about the spirit. It's hard to measure emotional satisfaction. That's,
Yeah.
you know, it's not something that.
You can't apply metrics to something that's so human that it's about, it's almost a visceral reaction, right? So, well, it is because it's the way that you feel when you interact with people, when you interact with things. And, the whole experience of, just buying it online, it's like that's pure transaction. You get your gratification from hitting that buy button. But if you're going to a market and you do it regularly and you get to do the vendors, you sometimes talk to them, you connect with them, you interact with them. They'll tell you about their latest thing, or they've collected this new item and you'll see what they've got for sale. But you're able to attach the experience of exploring their collections and able to connect it with the people who are doing the collecting as well. And yeah,
Absolutely. It's almost, yeah, like making a more satisfying transaction almost.
yeah,
When I buy from a friend, I am supporting, uh, I'm giving. The idea of one person's trash is another person's treasure. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to take something that you don't want. It's also, I'm actually going to enjoy it. I am going to
sharing the
treat it like a
experience.
treasure. It's
Yeah,
the relationship doesn't end when you let go of the thing. There's almost this satisfaction of knowing that experience. When someone's obsessed with dahlias and they love dahlias, almost like nerding out about the flower, about the dahlias, is part of that whole experience. That's how I believe that you know transactions don't necessarily just have to be transactional.
yeah,
It's almost like when you're buying a house, right? Let's say that you have a house and uh it's a beautiful, unique house, and you have that there's someone out there that wants to buy it. You might get pictures, right? If especially if offers are close, you might.
yeah,
It's not always the highest bidder wins, especially if it's kind of close, like somewhat of a unique object. Um,
mm.
when it is, and it's, especially if it's something that you cared about. Um,
You want it to
like
go
my
to a good
one of
home.
my plants, I would never list on eBay ever, ever. But if it's something you cared about and you saw a picture of a buyer for your house with their family, and they're literally writing you a letter being like, "I will make your house a home." That one
Mm,
buyer will lead to a more satisfying transaction, in my opinion. Uh,
yeah,
More high quality experience. That transaction feels like almost beyond a transaction to me. And I feel like we're losing something by, eBaying, by like Amazoning. I mean, the idea of taking the human out of transactions with how online shopping has moved into generalizing about getting things and speaking to the least amount of humans.
yeah,
When being a collector like me is so much excitement and passion, and there's so much satisfaction, pride that goes into my thing. I care about my thing. I think that it would be a disservice, or I don't think, you know, there are ways to sell things, but none of those ways feel great to me. And sometimes it's about building a feeling, creating a space
yeah,
for a feeling. And I think that there's not a lot of that anymore when
yeah.
it comes to online transactions.
Hmm.
For me, it's about getting to know the the person that I'm selling to, and that's why I decided to make Choosii a social experience in addition to a place where you can acquire and let go of stuff that you have. Um,
Yeah. Well, it makes me
it's
think of
different.
it's different, and it makes me think of that. Um, I think you said it was a commission where it's about all these really high end items as gifts, but once you take it out of the context of where it is, and you put it in this wasteland afterwards, when people come to it, generations or ages onwards, and they discover these objects, they have no value. And so the value that you've got with the item is intrinsic. It's what the person has put on it, but without the people, where's the value? Like it's just not there. So creating these connections, having Choosii where you're developing these connections to the other collectors, sharing in their fandom, sharing in their geeking out, and being able to know that something as a collector is going to someone else who cares about it just as much as you will. You're creating that connection there. So even by itself, if the object has no real intrinsic value, it has value to the people who have shared in that experience of that object, which is really sweet. I like
Absolutely.
that.
One of the, it's not just, it's not just a place for my crowd. It's the whole holistic feeling. I don't collect band shirts, but one person in our Discord collects band shirts, and it's funny because I don't. I have a shirt that I got from one of my first concerts, of this Panic at the Disco t-shirt, and it's in my
Yeah.
closet right now, and I haven't even looked at it in about a decade. Um, I could, they don't go on, they don't print these shirts anymore. It's not something that, uh, it's not a commodity, you know.
Mm,
It's kind of like an uncommon thing now. So
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I could put it up on eBay. I could put it up on, I could put it up on eBay, but the idea is that, now that I know how much this one person, let's call him Kyle. Now that I know that Kyle, I've seen Kyle's collection of band shirts. I would much prefer my thing going to Kyle than just leaving it up on eBay for like 90 days for some random username to like pick it up. I
Yeah.
prefer community commerce. I prefer knowing who a person is if I am going to uh, even transact with them.
Mm,
I've always believed more so in anti-scale when it comes to shopping. I love
hmm
supporting local business. I love buying from farmers markets. For me, like the less of, you know, uh, more of a human touch always makes, for me, commerce more rewarding.
mm,
So it's almost like not even the reason why I made Choosii as a different kind of place, to a different kind of experience when it comes to online shopping and selling. It's not a flaw that it's anti-scale. It's not I wouldn't say anti-scale because it's a new way that can, you know, that
well, it's
it's
designed to
an
be more
it's
curated.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I wouldn't say that it is I wouldn't say that it's not able to scale. It is able to scale.
Yes. No,
Uh,
but it's
but
you're
the
prioritizing
transactions between
quality over
people,
quantity. Yeah.
quality over quantity of a transaction. Um, when it comes to unique, uncommon objects, like they are special to some people, including me. I see them as
Mm,
special too. I don't think they deserve, especially if we care about these things. Collectors do care about their things. Doesn't deserve for me it just to leave my house and go to just a random anonymous person.
yeah.
Um, I would like to know that there's care, and that's hard because like you're talking about technology to enable like something as fluid as care, something like emotional satisfaction. Um, but that's why you know this is why the launch is important. I want to see people not just buying and selling on Choosy. I
hmm
want to I want to see how people like the experience of it. I
Yeah.
didn't make Choosii for um, I didn't make Choosii to be like another, a marketplace or like another social app. I
Yeah.
really just made it for people like me and people like my friends who haven't had anything similar.
And it's also the more important as well because, I mean, so many things have come out of COVID, but
Yeah,
when everyone had to kind of isolate and stay at home, you did lose that sense of community, and so many people had lost their spaces where they can go and connect with other people. And, it started to really highlight the way that people start to interact online, even though we didn't, even before we had to isolate and do all those sorts of things, because everything has become very transactional, very sanitized in the way that we do things, sometimes overly efficient because we're looking at volume and scale over connection and quality.
right.
So having these little pockets, creating communities like Choosii, which allows people to have these little pockets of community and connection and still able to, source what it is they're looking for and what they desire, and being able to find people that you can connect with the same, desires and, you
Right.
know, passions for what you do is, you know, it, it's the perfect thing for technology to be able to facilitate.
I think that everybody, I would not judge anybody who does want, there is a lot of great things about efficiency. But
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think, I think there's room for better experiences along with efficiency. For example,
Hmm.
like you could be so efficient about food that you could just drink Soylent every day. That's fine. Like to
But
just
where's the
have
love?
a
Where's the joy?
to just have like nutritionally complete gruel is like something that some people do. I am a foodie. I love, the feeling that I get from tasting food. And, in my culture, food is the hello. Like, I care about you.
Yeah.
I
The
welcome
greeting
you.
is, have you eaten yet?
Have you eaten yet? Exactly. For me, during COVID, especially when I couldn't see my family, I created an art project during COVID, and it was called Quarantine Care Package because when we weren't able to see our family, my family, what they would do was go to the Asian supermarket and get various things from the Asian supermarket, groceries, packaged goods, face masks, and they would put together little care packages, and my mom and dad would leave them on my door
Oh,
even without seeing or hugging or really saying anything, uh, having that quiet interaction, those gifts were an expression of care.
yeah.
Even just, seeing the items, knowing that, you know, that was an interaction, knowing that that came from a place of, my family wanting me to eat, to, remember my culture, to stay healthy. You know, it wasn't just like, if I just wanted Asian, if I just wanted groceries, I could have Instacarted that. But
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
the idea that this quarantine care package came when I was feeling lonely, and it was from my parents hoping that I'd be okay.
Yeah.
Seeing those items at my door, there's more around that. There was more satisfaction around that. And I think I was thinking that's when I birthed Choosii, the idea of Choosii during the pandemic as well. Um,
Yeah.
we weren't, we didn't have a lot of in person interactions with people. Um, I started collecting plants. There was not a lot of festivals or plant swaps or meetups. Or anything. So I remember joining online communities about it. And learning about rare plants, learning how to take care of them. It gave me ways to interact with other people that, you know, having less interactions, the interactions that I had with my passion community meant more to me. Even their things meant more to me. If we would, pass each other through the mail or through, like very small exchanges, getting a new plant for my collection from somebody else in my community was it almost also had that too. It was like I can remember, you know, the I can remember some of the people that gave me certain plants in my collection. I can remember,
Yeah.
when I met them and when I got this plant.
And when you look at the plant, you think of them as well.
When I Yeah, exactly. When I look at the plant, when I take care of it, I think of them. Um, getting something from a peer versus a stranger, getting something from my
Mhm.
family versus Instacarting it. Um, it feels more special to me, and to be able to make an impact that leaves a better experience for people, not exactly like, you know, if it's measured in the experience, for me to
Yeah.
make that kind of positive impact, and facilitate that easier for some
Mhm.
people, or just like, people like me.
Yeah.
That's the goal here. Well, that's my goal. I would be totally cool with that.
It's a good goal because yeah,
Yeah.
all of these experiences, all of these memories, it's it's nice because they're things that you can reflect on. They fire off all these positive neurons. You know, it just leaves you with good vibes and it makes you feel, it being able to be positive about your experiences, being able to be positive about your connections allows you to help to be more positive down the road. Like it just keeps paying forward.
Yeah, and I think that our economy is trending that way.
Mm.
I've spoken to a lot of collectors. Collecting is a growing hobby, and a lot, like I would say almost 80% of the Choosii wait list is Gen Z or millennial. When you think about the way that people's shopping habits are evolving, I don't think that my mentality over wanting to support my community, believing in responsible capitalism and mutual aid, in sustainable transactions, versus like, the invisibility of online shopping versus like more peer to peer transactions, more of these friendly transactions, these casual ones. You know, I think that the next generation does want more than just invisible packages from invisible people. I think
Yep.
that there are so many professional communities out there, um, so many hobbyist communities out there, but we really, you know, with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I think that we're seeing a trend towards integrating these parts of our lives. Like when we go out and we make transactions, we also want that to benefit our communities. We also want that to almost like shop our friends more. We see, I think, more. I think social commerce has been adopted a lot more with the next generation, and so I think that
Hmm.
this trend I think this trend is going to continue. I know that I've moved. Um, uh, I
Your
have
own
my own
habits.
preferences, and
Yeah.
I do think that community commerce is so promising because of our values. I think our values are changing, where we do want to see each other more.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah, because it's all the stuff with supply chains being problematic everywhere. I think a lot of more people are thinking about how they can, buy to support what's available more locally.
Hmm.
And, it does make you a bit more thoughtful about what you're buying and, considerate of where it comes from and the impact that you're making by making your transactions. So yeah,
right?
it's a fascinating trend forward.
I have looked at, you know, there are a lot of marketplace listings for plants, and some of
Hmm.
them are from far away. Like, uh, there are plants that are listed that are coming all the way from Singapore, that are coming from, um, other countries. And for me, like, I love rare plants. When I search a rare plant, there's not a lot of options, right? But I've always found it more satisfying not to, import a plant from abroad. You don't know
Mm.
whether it was, for me, I can't make a quick judgment on whether it was obtained through poaching or whether it was, what the supply chain looks like. But if I know that
Yeah.
one of my plant collector friends, nurtures plants and maybe like it had a little offshoot or a little baby and, they're the one I'm getting that from, it makes me feel better because the distance is shorter.
Hmm.
Why? Why? It's quicker. Yes, it is quicker for me to search for something rare and get it wherever it comes from if it's promised to be here in 3 days or
Hmm.
however long, a week. Uh, but it makes me feel better if I know that there's somebody in my neighborhood that has it, or there's somebody in
Yeah.
um, my local community that might have something similar.
Yeah. It's the provenance,
The provenance.
because having it connected to your community, your circles, even secondary, tertiary circles. Yeah, giving that level of trust and adding that quality of provenance to an item, especially if it's a collectible item, it it gives you a lot more satisfaction, but it also gives you a lot more security in what you're buying.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I read a lot of. Uh, I've always read a lot of magazines. I've felt like a very multidisciplinary founder in a way because, reading about, ethics, psychology, art, technology, economy, um, that well-roundedness that I think
Yeah.
from having so many experiences, from meeting so many people, really informs my approach in how I build moving forward. Um, and I think that gives me a little bit of this perspective that, when I create something, I never look at it from just one aspect of it. I
Mm.
never, build for the sake of the technology I'm building. I never, uh, move forward with, a project for only the sake of, it's to make money or something like that. Like it's
Yeah.
always so many different ways. I think about a holistic value to what its impact would be. And that's informed by, you know, last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, I photographed for the New York Times a series about climate
Mm.
activists and educators. And learning from so many people in sustainability, when I am building, I feel as if I've had values come from all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it with the perspectives of, more than what I studied, more than one perspective. And that makes me, I think, a better builder in a way because I always have a North
It
Star
does.
as to why I'm building, and I try to make it as informed as possible, not just by advisors or people in the tech world, but from maybe every interaction that I've had uh, with a lot of different circles.
Yeah, and it's like a passive mentoring community because while you're working with these people, you're talking to them because, well, actually, let's talk about that. When you're working in portraiture, photographing these people, trying to capture who they are for the profile or whatever theme is being captured for the brief, how do you cultivate that? What's your process?
My process, when it comes to a portrait, I've always loved to take an environmental portraiture angle. I always lead with environmental portraiture. I think about a person and their things. That's the way why I am the way I am. But
Yeah,
I look at them beyond them, almost beyond what they write on LinkedIn, beyond what's their Twitter bio. I talk to them and look beyond what it is they're saying to me. And I try to look at everything from 40 different angles, like the things that are in their house, the what they're wearing that day, what drink is in their hand, the pictures are framed on their walls. I try to think about a person as a sum of complex parts. Um, and that's really, really hard when you only have, eh, not that much time. Let me make sometimes it's an hour if I'm lucky. Maybe it is
yeah,
like 10 minutes. I've photographed activists like Linda Sarzour and Gloria Steinem, and you know, some startup founders are running, and I know this now too, are running between here and there. So I do a lot of research. Um, so I do a lot of research, but I go there and I'm open minded, and I'm always
yeah,
observing the environment as well. My favorite, my favorite I think subjects have been surprising mixes, just like me. One of them was a food artist, somebody who's an artist who was also a trained chef, who decided to use food as her medium of choice to, make artwork. So I
yeah,
thought that was very interesting because that is like something new in their toolbox, right? That's something that's
yeah,
unusual, but in their toolbox, art, food. I also try to think when I'm with a subject or when I'm about to be with a subject, my approach is also like, what parts of that can I relate to? What parts do I think I want to bring out to the best of my ability because those are the qualities that I admire about myself. Are they multidisciplinary? Are they a hustler? Are they a visionary? I constantly think about if I was in their shoes, how would I want to feel if there's one part of them that I could connect to? It's almost like this is really a weird thing to say, but I'm photographing myself over and over and over again because these are the qualities that I really admire in other people too. Um, so I try to think about it, not just like not just that TED Talk story that everybody knows, but if I only have 5 minutes to talk to somebody, I might talk to them about, the tree house that they built when they were a kid. And that's what, inspired them to be a builder. And
yeah,
I might think about and it's kind of interesting because then you take a minute, you make a judgment about, you know, this person that you don't know very well. And, what is that one thing? If I could pick one thing to showcase, what would that be? And then to make it real. So this is really funny, but I was photographing a company for Adweek, and it was like
hmm,
a CEO and 15 different C-suite executives from like across the globe, right? Europe,
yeah,
heads of every division, and the CEO in the first, I guess, 5 minutes. I had my assistants, we did stand ins and everything. And I'm always adjusting as I move. I'm iterating if I learn something new. So I had him in the front. But when he came on board and I spoke to him, he was that kind of person that was like, everyone is on my team. I'm a team player, even though I am, the CEO and the founder. I want it to not be like I'm the most prominent one. I did it with everybody else. So what I did, I remember putting him in the back, but in an on an elevated, like on like an elevated tier. I think they were standing
Yeah.
on some stairs, but making sure he was in the back, but he wasn't the biggest. I was also
Mhm.
making sure that, you know, for example, um, when I think about women and where they're placed in my shot, and whether there is, I always think that there's bias. For example, men being placed above women, like visually, and in positions of power. There are a lot of photography has these like almost
Yeah,
like
these very
visual
subtle
biases.
biases, yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. With how it is a subjective way. It is the artist's
Mhm.
interpretation, and I don't think that women have been photographed as powerfully in group settings as they could
Yeah.
be. So I'm almost even thinking about the impact of the way that I
Mhm.
place them. Not, and that's beyond the composition. That's beyond the surface. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about what message am I trying to say, and what does this person want to say? Um,
Yeah.
and that's why I think he really liked my image of him, because it wasn't like I'm photographing him like every CEO. I'm thinking about the values that I
Yeah.
want to highlight about him, and one of those things was his humility, but also his, it's almost like servant leadership, right? That's what
Yeah.
Steve Jobs said. A leader that works with their team and trusts them, leads them, and has this mission effort. That's something that I admired so much, because that's the kind of leader and founder I want to be. And so I
Yeah.
attached to that. It's so personal.
Mm.
Art, just like being a founder too, for me, it's hard
Yes.
to detach from my values. It's hard to
Mm.
detach making something from believing in it. That's why
Yeah.
I don't think I can make something that I don't believe in, um,
Absolutely.
whether
Well,
it be
it's
art
so
or,
important.
yeah, I know. Uh, there are just, maybe that's just because I'm not like a good, I wouldn't be able to sell it if my heart wasn't behind what I was making, right?
Yeah.
I also, I used to do the same thing for corporate work with my creative studio as well. So I would attach to something with a brand that I really loved. For example, the
Mhm.
assignment that I did for Barclays was about women executives and their mentors, like
Yep.
women mentors, women executives coming up in the ranks. And so I think about
Mhm.
telling a story that I really, really believe in before I used to take on a corporate assignment as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, it's all connected because your experiences, seeing these people, the way they work, the kind of values that they have, and the way that they want to present themselves, it all informs your own experience as a founder. And, I just love the fact that your creative work and your tech background is just blending together and just giving you this completely different shape of an entrepreneurial journey that others would have.
I guess I'm just so choosy myself, right? I remember being so choosy with my assignments for my creative studio, and being 1000% like I wanted, um, bringing my 1000% to every assignment, because I was taking the assignments that I really loved. And the thing is, when you do things, when you make things, when you tell messages that you really stand behind, that you believe in, the what comes to you next, then you have a track record of building these things along with your values. And
Yeah,
every project uh, like builds off of that next thing. And every
absolutely.
project becomes a logical continuation because you build something, or you make something, it's good. You knew that you could stand behind it. People then expect you to do the same thing, but that's all you. So you love the next thing you do. It's that logical progression. So being choosy about my projects paid off in the long run because not only was I able to discover, what my point of view was, what I cared about, how I, you know, how I produce my projects. That's like, you know, leadership style, project management, like how you go about operating as a human being.
Yeah,
It made me think. It made me think and approach every other project better.
it's all very iterative.
It's all very iterative.
Yeah.
Being a
So,
collector, being an artist, and I think being a technician too.
yes, absolutely. It's all about learning and getting better and finding other ways of doing things. So, because there is this constant growth that's happening in all of these spaces, how have you found support in this space or mentorship or, you know, how have you gone to find out what you don't know about what you don't know?
I always, it's funny. I always I always leverage my the power of my own network. For example, I'm a really good networker. Have
Very
I'm
important.
constantly going uh, fearlessly into spaces where I can learn what I'm curious about. When I was 16 years old, that was going to American Photographic Association meetings, the APA. When
Yeah.
I eventually applied to graduate school in photography, I decided not to go. But the president of the APA wrote my recommendation letter. When it came to becoming a digital tech, she gave me my first job as a digital tech on her sets. Um, so just showing up is step one.
Hmm.
Knowing what you want to learn, figuring out where it is that those people are that can teach you, that can support you, offering to add value. Me, it was using what I could offer was as a young person, my flexibility, right? Drop
Hmm.
everything and let's, help me out with this project on this weekend. Yeah, I'm down. Nothing is too crazy. Nothing was, um, I was using that as a benefit of my enthusiasm and just being able to show up. And
Hmm.
the world is busy. It's crazy. We all have our lives to do. Showing up um, is not easy. It's not
Yeah.
easy always. But that was something I just dedicated myself to. I wouldn't I would try not to skip class too much to do it, but it was about community. So for me right now, I am in a couple of communities. One called Founders Cafe, which is out of Stanford University, and it is one of those you have to apply to join it, but you join like 125 founders who are like solo-ish founders. We're all really high achieving, but like solo-ish, like
Yep.
probably a little bit figuring this out on our own and
Hmm.
helping each other because we all have different complementary skill sets. We can help each other figure out those things that we don't learn. And as solo
Yep.
founders, you're managing engineering, design, strategy, operations, everything is your own
Hmm.
responsibility. So even if you can only take certain areas like 40% of the way, you have people to learn from.
Yep.
Most recently joined Launch House, which is this another new community that is actually really cool. They have a clubhouse in New York and a mansion in San Francisco and LA or something like that. And it's really close knit. Some of the founders even live together, uh, work together all the time. Um, so I have tried to find people like me and hang out with them. That's
Yep.
that's it. Let it organically happen. I don't do, the cold email, like, let's just, I want something from you. All of my relationships are long term relationships. There might be some people that I ask that I knew from my photography days.
Hmm.
My photography agent had a background in brand partnerships for startups. And one of her previous startups was acquired by Macy's in the consumer retail space. So it's not just about new connections; it's also about re-engaging your old connections in new ways. Uh,
Yeah.
and people don't think about that. They're like, "Oh, I don't know anybody who does this." Well, it's like you've known a lot of people, maybe over the past 10 years or 15 years. What are they doing now? You know, I try to. Uh, I try to keep up with what people are doing now and try to re-engage with old friends on a regular basis too. Even and not because of, being useful or something like that, but
Yeah.
just keeping my network open and
Active.
positive.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody that I can help out, I absolutely will, because karma is
Hmm.
one of those things that just comes back to you. Like, you help somebody out, and there are a lot of people who want to get into photography that I'm now also passing different opportunities to and different knowledge to as well.
Hmm.
Um, and just being positive and putting out what you want to see happen to you. You never know. Uh,
Yeah.
it always comes back. So I'm doing the same thing that I've always done, leveraging my own network, entering spaces, even if it's scary, new spaces, just doing it anyway, having no fear, asking a question, no questions are dumb, and just being really eager.
Yep.
I think people want to
Absolutely.
help if they believe that their help will matter. So
Yes.
just being also really appreciative too. Like, I
Hmm.
expect nothing uh, ever. Just good conversation.
Absolutely. And there's so many things that, a lot of people, I say this a lot of people treat networking in a completely mercenary kind of way because they're expecting a transaction out of it. But it really is all about the connections and about the people and who they are. And it's not always going to be about what they do because knowing the people opens doors and
Right.
they won't always be explicit doors. And,
They're not always.
there's always people worth knowing.
It's I think that in a lot of other cultures outside of America, where I'm from, I don't know about Australia, but the relationships are a huge part of business.
Hmm.
In parts of Asia, the Middle East, these relationships do long-term relationships do take a front seat, rather than
Yeah.
just like, meet somebody, make a deal, just, go
Hmm.
there, make a deal. There's a preamble, there's a dance, there is, a history of knowing each other's networks. There are, you know there there's so much more to the relationship beyond that transaction. And
Yeah.
I've seen that so much. I think that being Asian American and having this deep cultural knowledge um, outside of my experience in America, and being able to integrate various values and knowledge that comes from different kinds of interactions, um, has been a really big benefit, I think, for me. Um, because I do know what it's like for you know the soft things behind transactions are,
Yeah.
you know, when we when you think about business as if you were like you weren't, I don't know, looking from the outside in, it's there's this like preconceived notion that it is that this like, you know, every man for themselves, like, you know, when we think about business capitalism, you know, this all men for themselves, this competition, this this very like almost like a battle royale,
It
right?
is.
You that is a different vision than, for me, what it means to be good at business is cultivating relationships, about inspiring others, about leading with trust, about, I think, not always making the quickest deal, but always making the best one. And the best one
Yeah.
for me is always one that's win win, always one that
Mhm.
offers value to the most.
Yeah.
And that's a different perspective, I think. And I think that our mentality for what we expect from business, what we expect from technology, I hope uh, that it is more than just the most efficient outcome. That would make
Mhm.
me happy anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's been absolutely awesome. Just hearing your perspective about, the way that you're putting the people behind transactions in all respects, whether it's relationships or commercial. And yeah, it's just so important to be thinking about the people behind all our interactions. So, might wrap on up with some of those other questions I mentioned. And what hobby or interest do you have that is most unrelated to your field or field of work? Given how broad you are,
Oh,
it could be
my
anything.
life is so integrated right now where my hobby for nurturing rare plants and collecting rare plants has to do with my startup, Choosii, social app for collectors, which, you know, has to do with my art because I'm a still life photographer that collects quirky things from the world and puts them together to make stories. So let me see. One thing that's unrelated to my art, my app, and my plants. Huh. An integrated life. So
I think that
one
totally works as
hobby.
well because you were able to make your hobby about plants, about everything
That
else.
is my answer because it's almost like my work is like 30% a hobby. It is like
Yeah.
30% like the work. And it is like 30%, I don't know, like like calling or something that is just part of my irrational motivation. So I
Yeah.
believe that the word in Japan for this is ikigai, where you believe
Yep.
that there is a purpose level to it. There is you love it, it's fun. Um, and it also has an impact, and you can also make it your career. I've tried to integrate the things that I find fun into the things that I try to be good at and do for work.
Yeah.
So it's everything.
No, absolutely. And that's not a bad way of doing it because, people keep saying you should love what you do. And if you can make that work, if you can bring those two worlds together in a way that is complementary and doesn't kill the vibe, then, you know, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I do think about that sometimes when people say you should love what you do. I do believe that in my case, that is real, and that is the most rewarding thing that I can say about myself is that I've crafted life to be, I couldn't ask for a better way. I've crafted it, but I will also say it takes it has taken a lot of work. It has
Yeah.
taken a lot of you know what, risk management,
Mm.
in the sense that what you love, um, emotional satisfaction will drive you to, uh, you know, unknown waters, because you're not sure. There can be no surety if your path is not linear or repeatable, or you just have to learn and iterate. And as you keep going, you start learning, I could improve on this, and then you have to improve
Yeah.
it. Um, as you keep going,
Follow
you
through.
learn what, not just what you love, but what you hate. And you're going to make mistakes because it is iterative. It is unpredictable. It is risky. So we should, but I will also acknowledge, I don't have any kids right now. I don't have, my parents are independent. I will also acknowledge that my circumstances have, and discovering a lot about myself at a very early age, has helped in giving me the time to weather such risks, and the
Yep.
ability to improve in the areas where I've assigned myself to improve it in. And that's would be much harder for me if it was decades into the future, or if my path was longer
Mm.
than it was. I just squashed so much of it together, right? Learning about computer science while I was learning about art, you know,
Yep.
d- learning about plants while I decided to build an app to solve all my problems.
Yeah.
Doing many things at once. I'm a very good multitasker, but that means I may have 3 failures at once that I'm fixing all on the same day or week. Uh, it leaves is a full life, and
Mm.
fitting other things into a full life is, I think it's a privilege, but it's also it's limiting in the way where, well, there's always a lot to think about,
Yeah.
just mentally, because you're always dealing with these things from 3 different angles. You have uh it's like when things are good, they're really good. And when things are uh when things are bad, not that they're bad, but
They're
when
not
your
optimal.
day is off, you're almost like fighting a war on 3 different fronts, where you're like, "Oh my
Mm.
gosh, did I just do this whole
Fires everywhere.
project?" And yeah, exactly, exactly. You're constantly looking at what I mentioned, when I crafted a piece of art, I would spend the whole day making just 5 images, or, 2 animations. When you're that much
Mhm.
of a perfectionist, I would say, it could be difficult because you want to get everything right. And sometimes you can't, and you just have to make it as best as you could be. It's almost like all consuming,
Yeah.
but I
But
like it.
yeah, it's when you have a goal, when you have objective, when you have ideas that you want to get done, it's hard and it is going to be challenging, but it's about, persevering and being resilient, about understanding that things aren't always going to be smooth.
Right. That's one of the things I really believe you need if
Hmm.
you're going to have a life where you do something that you
Yeah.
love. You're going to need perseverance. You're going to need some aspect of creativity, of fearlessness, and
Mm.
just, yeah, I would say perseverance is probably the biggest one, because you have to weather storms. Uh,
Yeah.
doing something that, especially if it hasn't been done before in your way, that means you will always have to get back up. You can't just like
Absolutely.
lay face down on the ground because something doesn't work out. Because it might not, or it might not win the battle, but you'll have to win the war.
Yes. Exactly. Okay, and which childhood book holds the strongest memories for you?
I really love Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. Uh, have you heard of that one?
Talk about fires. Yes, so many fires at once, trying to juggle that.
I love the Series of Unfortunate Events because it's all about creative problem solving, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Uh, the world, especially when you're a kid, you have no control over your
Hmm.
circumstances, and there are a lot of things that you don't have control over. And you just have to make the best of every situation,
Hmm.
and get out, move on, stay optimistic. And I always talk about, not every event is always going to be fortunate, but when you have, when you recognize your talents and you can lean on your friends, um, and the people close to you, you really, I do believe that you can do anything,
Yeah,
but with a good
because you've got
support
that support.
network,
You've got, yeah,
yeah, and a good talent
absolutely.
yourself, yeah.
Yes, of course. And lastly, we've already covered most of this. So, in just sum it up if you like, what advice would you give someone who wants to do what you do, or what advice should they ignore?
My advice for somebody who, for somebody that wants to do what I do, I would say diversify, uh, be, being multidisciplinary, and versatile and nimble. Always have a side hustle, right? Be learning something that you're not currently doing for work or, for school. Always learn something else. Not only is it good to have a plan B and a plan C, but you might find something awesome if you put parts of those two things together. And
Yeah,
I just, one side hustle or maybe two. Don't go crazy because then you'll lose focus.
yeah,
But try to always have, like, I don't know.
something you're exploring.
Exactly. Always be exploring, one more thing,
Hmm.
that you're curious about. What advice would I lean away from? I would say I wouldn't listen to, if you're really curious about how to do something or go somewhere, achieve something, and somebody says you can't do it, I would say never indulge the idea that you can't do it. You think about the conditions that would have to be present for you to be able to do it. Think
Hmm.
about, you know, think about what it would look like, what the world would look like for you to be able to, and try to get closer. Try to figure out a different path if need be, or a new flair on what it is you're doing. But I could do it, and the power of
Yeah.
and that, or, um if this were true, uh then I could do that. I would always say
Hmm.
it's never no. It's just like a situation.
It is. And it's just either getting, yeah, getting closer to it, finding a way around it, or, coming at it from a different angle.
Exactly. One of the things that I've mentioned to myself when things get hard is scope it down or scope it, if something sounds too ambitious, right? Just give yourself more time. If you can't give
Mm.
yourself more time, make it smaller. When I have a very ambitious creative project and I really want it to be this great, surreal, feeling, this scene that says a lot of messages. What do I
Yeah.
do if I do not have a giant, budget or a lot of time? I just miniaturize it. I
Yeah.
miniaturize the scene. Don't think about, it exactly. Think about the essence of what your message is, what you want to achieve, and you could really accomplish that essence on much less if you think
Yeah.
about adapting it, or adapting the scope, or just making the project a little bit more miniature. You could probably get the most important parts of what you want to achieve
Yeah.
just in a different way. It'll just look a little different, and you can build on that.
Yes. Ah, absolutely excellent advice, no matter what field you're in. So, this has been such an incredible conversation, Shirley. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. If people would like to know more about what you do and what you're building and Choosii, where can they go?
So if you're curious about Choosii, you can go to www.choosii.us. Choosii is spelled CHOOSII.US. And you can learn more about Choosii. It's my social app for collectors. And if you want to see my art, you can go to www.shirleyshotyu.com. And Shirley Shot You is my first name, Shot, and my last name, YU. It's a pun.
It's
Dot
an
com.
excellent
And then
pun.
you'll
I
see my
approve.
art. Exactly.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Shirley. This has been absolutely amazing. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. I hope you have a wonderful day too. Ciao.
I've loved speaking with Shirley about having a technically oriented family and finding her way through her own technical path to creative entrepreneurship, and now blending the two with her new journey as a founder. To learn more about Shirley and what we discuss on the show, or to connect with us, please visit the Steam Powered website at steampoweredshow.com. You can also find out more about Choosii at choosii.us and Shirley on social media, the links for which will be in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, please let me know. Subscribe to the show, leave us a rating, and share this with your geeky or geek curious friends. You can also support Steam Powered on Patreon and the Steam Powered Show, the link for which will also be in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.